What is up, YouTube? Thanks for joining me. Today we are looking at a sound that was in one of my previous tutorials. It's a sound that was in the background of one of the tracks that I was working on in one of my previous videos, and a couple of my Patreon supporters had asked me to go in depth on how I created that sound. Let's have a look at the sound that I'm talking about. It might sound a little bit different because I'd originally rendered that sample out, and I basically just used the same principles that I'd used to create that sound to quickly recreate it so I can show you guys how I did it. So let's go ahead and add an instance of Serum, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this MIDI across. So take note of the velocities in this MIDI over here. So as you can see, it's obviously doing some octave work over here. With a little bit of overlap there, the sound doesn't sound like it's got portamento on it, but I did use it in the sound design process, so that's important. Let's copy that over, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mute this one, and we can start building up the sound from scratch. So first things first, let's transpose this MIDI channel to +5, because that's the key that I'm working on in this track. And then what I'm going to do quickly is I'm just going to show you the kind of fundamental idea of how I created the sound. The bass kind of tone is created using FM of sine waves, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to disable the oscillators, and I'm going to show you the kind of trick to get that kind of grindy tone on top over here. So what it is, I enabled the noise oscillator, and let's go down and select xF kick attack 7. And here we're going to key track it so that it, the pitch changes as we change the notes. So when we do that octave, it's kind of the key of the sample is going to change. But here we're not going to enable one shot like we did for the baseline tutorial. We're going to leave it as is. So what happens now is the sample is actually going to loop, and it's going to create this effect. I'll show you now when I'm going to play the keys. That's a pretty cool technique to get a sort of instant, like, grindy robotic sound. You know, if you don't want to go through the whole process of like FMing your synths together and stuff, it kind of just quick sort of semi-FM type of sound. It's not obviously not frequency modulation going on there, but it kind of does sound a little bit like frequency modulation. We're going to set the velocity to modulate the level, and we can turn it down and then just turn the modulation amount to about 40% or so. So now the velocity of our MIDI keys, or the MIDI clip that we've got, is going to alter the amount of that grindy tone that gets mixed in alongside the oscillators which we're going to create now. So I hope that makes sense. Now what we can do is we can enable oscillator A. Let's move this one over to basic shapes and leave it on the sine wave. And this guy we can set to, under digital over here, this FFT add seconds. So the sort of wobbly tone in the sound is created by frequency modulating two sine waves together. And it's very similar to the effect that you get from a kind of saw wave sine wave frequency modulation. There's a little bit less of that high end going on, but it's cool because we're replacing that with the noise oscillator like I showed you just now. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to turn the level of this guy down. We can turn this guy down. Oscillator A we can turn down 1 octave. So oscillator A is -1 and oscillator B is -2 octaves, like this. And let's go ahead and enable frequency modulation from B on oscillator A. We can just turn this all the way for now, and let's listen to what sort of effect we've got going on now. So what we can do is we can set this velocity to modulate the frequency amount, or the FM amount over here, but maybe not so much, something like that. And then the reason I use this FFT add seconds is because using this wavetable position, you've kind of got the ability to add harmonics into the sound. And that kind of changes the characteristics of the sort of wobble of the sound. I actually did this in a previous tutorial, so yeah, I do actually use this trick pretty often. So now what we can do is we can add a filter, and let's just send oscillator A to the filter. Let's not filter out that noise because we want the sort of high frequency kind of sound to come through still. And we can modulate this also with the velocity, something like this over here. That should be good. I actually figured something out here while I was busy doing this tutorial. So the pitch that I'd made, I set it to plus 7%. But now while doing it and tweaking it, I actually just noticed that it sounds so much better at plus 10%. So let's go with that. So then if we go down to a lower octave, we start to get some more sort of grindy textures. And you'll notice as, if you've got a MIDI controller and you're kind of playing with the sound, you'll notice as you hit harder, you get more of that high frequency sort of noise oscillator coming through. As well as the filter being changed a little bit and some of the other parameters. So it's a cool way of creating kind of various settings and then being able to re-trigger those exact kind of tones in something like a pluck sound or something like that. So with this type of sound, I often use like a single velocity sort of modulation rather than automation and stuff like that, because I don't really want to vary the sound too much over time. It's more about creating like those single sort of plucky tones, if that makes sense. So then we've pretty much got the basics of the sound here. I added a couple of envelopes just to kind of create a bit more of a plucky tone. So let's enable envelope 3 over here and just turn the decay down. And what we can do is we can send envelope 3 to the wavetable position of oscillator B. And then we can just set the amount to like something like that. And let's create a very, very sharp pluck. And we can also actually assign this onto the filter maybe if we want, just a little bit, just to kind of add some of that sort of pluck element to it. So now remember what I was saying about the portamento, like here you can actually get creative. You can change it to however you want to fit it into your track. You know, if you want more of a slidey kind of sound, then you want obviously a higher portamento. I used quite a low portamento because I just wanted to get a bit of a sort of slidey motion, but not too much of an obvious kind of slide. Something like that should be perfect. So now let's look at the effects. So here what I did is I just added another filter, and I like to use this HB12 multi. And what this allows you to do is you've actually got kind of 2 filters built in here, one bandpass and one high pass. And allows you to kind of carve out a section of the sound that you're working with, and then I use the mix to kind of mix that section in or out. So say for example I want to add some mid-range. I'll show you how I go about doing that. It's a cool way of bringing that kind of a growly texture out a little bit further in the sound. I believe then I just used a little bit of compressor, maybe mixed it down a little bit, and then some delay. So here it's set to 1/8 on both sides, and the feedback's up quite high. Surprise, surprise, did not use ping pong on this one for like the first time ever. If you've been following my tutorials, you know like ping pong on everything, but anyway. If you want, you can kind of set some envelope stuff going on in this filter over here. I don't like to do it too much because that kind of creates a little bit of a phasey effect, like I explained in one of my previous tutorials. When you've got the mix of a filter halfway and you do too much modulations, you can kind of create a phasey effect, and I kind of want this to be more of a solid I don't want too much kind of modulations and movements going on. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and post this preset onto my Patreon for my $5 supporters. You can add some EQ to cut out the low end on the channel or during the mix session. I've explained that enough on my channel to not have to really go through it again. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go to one of my previous videos and check out my process on EQing and stuff like that. A big thanks to IDM Mag, proud supporters of the dance music scene and my channel. So as always, I'm going to go ahead and post this preset onto my Patreon for my $5 supporters. If you want to know what that's all about, check out the link on the screen somewhere around about now. As always, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. See you guys next time.